The rain had a way of making everything feel lonelier. I stood under the faded green awning of an old cafe on the corner of Shibuya's quietest street, shivering in my too thin cardigan. My shoes were soaked, my toes numb. In my trembling hands, I held the reason my life would never be the same again, a crumpled contract with my late father's signature at the bottom, ink slightly smudged from a teardrop I refused to admit was mine. Debt owed, 83 million yen. Settlement agreement, marriage in exchange for full repayment. Marriage. I was marrying a stranger tonight. My stomach clenched. I had rehearsed this moment in my head so many times that it felt like a scene from a script I no longer wanted to perform. What kind of woman sells herself like this? And yet, I wasn't selling, I was paying. For my father's sins. For the lies he left behind in a tidy envelope marked "Formayu." I'm sorry. The bell above the cafe door jingled. I looked up. He stood in the doorway, framed by the soft yellow light spilling out onto the wet pavement. Tall. Dark suit. No umbrella, though the rain streaked his black hair across his forehead. Sharp jaw, sharper eyes. He looked like a man who didn't ask questions, only gave answers. Are you Mayu? His voice was low. Smooth, but not warm. I nodded. My throat was too tight to answer. He stepped closer. His gaze dropped to the paper in my hand before returning to my face. I'm Renji Kurosawa. So this was him. The man who now owned my fate. Renji didn't offer a smile or a handshake. Just a simple, "Let's get this over with," before turning on his heel and walking back inside. The ceremony was held in a small private room at the back of the cafe. A government official stood waiting, looking almost as uncomfortable as I felt. Renji signed first. His signature was confident, bold. Mine trembled so much I had to pause halfway through. No vows. No rings. Just paper, names, and silence. And like that, I was Mrs. Kurosawa. Afterwards, Renji held the door open for me without a word. His driver waited by the curb in a sleek black car. I sat in the back seat, hands in my lap, heart aching. He didn't speak. He didn't even glance at me. Just stared out the window, his reflection pale and unreadable against the glass. That night, I slept in a room that smelled like lavender and wealth. The bed was too soft. The sheets too clean. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other girls would have traded places with me in a heartbeat if only they knew what came with this so-called fairy tale. Because this wasn't love. This wasn't even kindness. This was a transaction. And I was the receipt. The Kurosawa penthouse wasn't just a home, it was a world. A world of glass and steel, where the skyline glittered like diamonds and silence echoed louder than footsteps. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city like a god surveying his domain. Everything was sleek. Cold. Impeccably arranged. There was no clutter, no warmth, just space. Too much space. Renji gave me a quick tour that first night, as if ticking boxes off a list. Kitchen. Guest bedroom. Library. That's your room, he said, pausing at a door that opened to a beautiful space with pale walls and a queen-sized bed. Not our room. Just mine. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the strap of my worn purse like a lifeline. He nodded curtly and walked away. And that was that. The days that followed fell into a rhythm of emptiness. Renji left early, before I even stepped out of bed, and returned late, after I had retreated to my room with a book I wasn't really reading. Meals were ordered by a housekeeper I never saw, and the staff kept their distance as if I were an ornament not meant to be touched. I wandered the halls sometimes, barefoot, pretending I wasn't completely alone. There was a piano in the corner of the living room, untouched. A wall of books I dared not disturb. Paintings that looked more expensive than my father's entire debt. And one door always locked at the end of the corridor. His office, I assumed. Renji barely spoke to me. A nod when he passed. A brief good evening with no real intention of conversation. His phone was always ringing, his eyes always elsewhere. It was clear, I wasn't part of his life. Just a clause in a contract. One evening, I worked up the courage to knock on his office door. No response. I opened it slowly and peeked in. He sat at his desk, sleeves rolled up, collar loose, eyes fixed on a document. His jacket hung over the back of his chair. He looked different, like this, less perfect. Human. Dinner's here, I said quietly. He didn't look up. Leave it on the table. I nodded and stepped back, closing the door behind me. That night, I sat alone at the dining table set for two, picking at my food. The city lights blinked outside like 1,000 tiny witnesses, and I realized how silent everything truly was. This place, this life, it was beautiful, yes. But it wasn't mine. I was a guest in a gilded cage. And every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a wife. I saw a girl pretending not to break. It started small. A cup of hot tea waiting for me on the kitchen counter one morning. I hadn't heard anyone wake up. I almost thought it was a mistake until I saw the post-it note beside it. Chamomile. You looked tired yesterday. No name. No signature. Just his handwriting, neat and controlled. I stared at it for a long moment, fingers brushing the paper like it might vanish. The next week, I dropped a glass in the living room. It shattered across the marble floor, sharp and cruel. I froze more from instinct than fear. Growing up, loud crashes meant raised voices. Accidents had consequences. I was already reaching for a cloth when I heard footsteps. Renji knelt beside me, wordless. He picked up the larger shards with his bare hands, the veins in his wrist taut with restraint. You'll cut yourself, I said, reaching out. So will you. His eyes met mine for a beat longer than necessary, and something flickered there. Tension, perhaps. Or understanding. We didn't speak after that. But he left a small box of band-aids outside my door that night. One day bled into the next, but the Cold War between us had softened. We weren't friends, not yet. But we weren't strangers, either. We were something undefined, cohabitants with a secret truce. Then came the charity gala. I hadn't expected him to involve me in anything remotely public, so when a formal black dress appeared in my room with a note. You're coming with me. Be ready by 7. I nearly panicked. The dress was sleek, elegant, far too flattering. I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl looking back. With my hair up and a pearl necklace around my throat, I looked like I belonged in his world. But I didn't. Not really. Renji met me in the foyer. He paused when he saw me. His eyes flicked down my frame, then quickly up again. "You look fine," he said flatly. "Fine." My stomach tightened, but I nodded. "Thank you." The gala was held in a ballroom drenched in chandeliers and old money. People stared at us. Whispered. I could feel the weight of their questions pressing against my back like blades. "Who is she? Why her?" Renji didn't flinch. He introduced me as his wife, voice firm, expression blank. But every time I faltered, he was there offering his arm, filling in gaps in conversation, gently steering me away from questions I couldn't answer. At one point, a woman with too much perfume and a smile like a knife leaned close. "She doesn't look like your type, Renji." He didn't miss a beat. "She's not. She's better." My heart stuttered. I turned to look at him, but his face was unreadable. Was he being polite? Sarcastic? Honest? I didn't know. But something cracked open inside me that night. A part of me I thought had shut tight. Not love, not yet, but curiosity. Hope. Maybe this arrangement didn't have to be a prison. Maybe it could be something more. The first clue was the building. A gleaming tower of glass and steel nestled in the heart of Tokyo's financial district. I had taken a cab on a whim, following Renji's car one rainy Thursday afternoon. I wasn't proud of it. Snooping wasn't something I did, but something in me needed to know more. More than polite nods and business suits. More than the man who brought me tea but never smiled. The taxi stopped half a block behind Renji's town car. He stepped out and walked through the glass doors of a high-rise bearing the words Kurosawa Enterprises. My breath caught. Not Kurosawa Holdings. Not Kurosawa Trading. Enterprises. As in the conglomerate. The name that echoed in every financial news broadcast, every high-stakes acquisition, every elite social circle. I stared at the bold silver letters until they blurred. I married into that Kurosawa? Renji hadn't just been a stranger with deep pockets. He was the Renji Kurosawa, only son of Hiroto Kurosawa, the business magnate who practically owned half the skyline. Groomed since birth to take over an empire worth billions. And I had been living with him, brushing my teeth 2 doors down, wearing his last name like it meant nothing. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. The next time I saw him, I confronted him in the kitchen. He'd just come home, tie loose, phone buzzing in his hand. "You lied to me," I said, voice low but shaking. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "About what? You never told me who you are. Who your family is. I married you thinking you were just," I faltered, "a man who paid off my father's debt. But you're a Kurosawa." He said it like a burden. I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" He sighed, setting his phone down slowly. "Because you agreed to marry a stranger. Not a prince." I stared at him, stunned. His expression softened for the first time, just slightly. Would it have changed anything? Yes, I admitted. I would have been more afraid. He stepped closer, until we were just 2 feet apart. I didn't want you to feel indebted to my name. Just to the deal we made. There was no arrogance in his tone. No pride. Just weariness. And for the first time, I wondered what it was like to carry the weight of a legacy so vast it eclipsed your own identity. To be someone everyone wanted, but no one really saw. We stood there in silence, the air between us brittle but charged. You could have just told me, I whispered. I didn't want you to run. And in that moment, I realized, maybe he wasn't hiding out of pride. Maybe he was protecting me from the truth, from the world, from the version of himself the headlines painted. And maybe, just maybe, he was as lost in this arrangement as I was. After that night, something shifted. Renji didn't suddenly become warm or affectionate, but the walls between us grew thinner. His eyes lingered longer. His voice softened when he said my name. And for the first time since our marriage, he began to include me in his world. It started with a request. I need someone to visit the Kurosawa Foundation site in Minato. The staff keeps getting shuffled. It's a mess. I thought, maybe you could go. I blinked. Me? Why? You have better instincts than most of my executives. I almost laughed. I'm not trained. I was working part-time at a flower shop 2 months ago. He shrugged. That's why you see things they don't. So I went. The foundation office was tucked between government buildings and quiet parks. I expected cold stares and curt words, but what I found was warmth. A room full of overworked volunteers, underfunded programs, and genuine compassion. Children's welfare. Women's shelters. Food banks. This was the part of the Kurosawa name the tabloids never mentioned. I started going every few days. Sometimes just to observe. Sometimes to help. I reorganized storage closets, answered emails, even helped plan a fundraiser. The staff welcomed me not because of my name, but because I showed up. Every night, I reported back to Renji. Over late dinners that we started sharing by habit, I'd talk about a child I met, or a broken printer I fixed. He listened, actually listened, with his elbows on the table and a glass of red wine untouched in front of him. One night, he said, "You're changing the place." I smiled. It's the place that's changing me. Our conversations became longer. He told me about his childhood, how his father left for work before sunrise and came home after midnight. How being the heir wasn't a privilege, but a role carved into him like stone. "I didn't choose this," he said one night, eyes tired. "But I'm trying to make it mean something." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the billionaire or the husband or even the heir. I saw a man. A man shouldering too much and asking for too little. Once, when I came home late from the foundation, I found him asleep on the couch, still in his suit, a file folder resting on his chest. I covered him with a blanket, fingers brushing the edge of his jaw. He stirred slightly, murmuring my name in his sleep. It hit me then how dangerous this was. How I had started to look forward to his voice, his presence, his quiet way of caring. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not in a marriage built on debt. But sometimes, love doesn't knock politely. Sometimes, it slips through the cracks you didn't even know were there. The morning began with a letter. I found it on the kitchen counter, placed neatly beside a bowl of strawberries and a glass of juice, Renji's usual silent breakfast gift. But today, there was also a single folded page with my name written in precise ink. I hesitated before opening it. Mayu. I know I haven't said much. It's never been easy for me, not with words, not with feelings. But there are things I need you to know. You were never part of my plan. But you've become the only part that makes sense. I didn't marry you out of kindness. I married you because it was convenient. But somewhere between obligation and routine, you changed everything. The way you look at people. The way you breathe life into cold rooms. The Kurosawa name weighs on me more than I show. But you've carried it with grace I never expected. You've carried me. I know this started as debt. But if you'll let me, I want it to end in love. Renji. I read it twice. Then a third time, hand pressed over my chest as if it could stop the rush of emotion rising there. When he came home that evening, I didn't wait for him to speak. I met him at the door, barefoot and breathless, holding the letter in one hand and my heart in the other. You mean it? I asked, voice barely a whisper. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. Yes. He stepped forward, slowly as if giving me time to run. But I didn't. I don't need diamonds or dinner or grand speeches, I said. But if you want me, not because of the contract or my father's debt, if you want me, I do. His hands cupped my face, hesitant at first. Then certain. And when he kissed me, it wasn't cold. It wasn't practiced. It was home. We didn't tear up the contract. We didn't erase the past. But we rewrote what came next. I moved into the master bedroom without a word being said. He began waking up later just to have breakfast with me. I planted flowers on the penthouse balcony. He let me fill the empty spaces with books and warm lights and laughter. The locked office door stayed closed. But one day, he handed me a key. Not because I expect you to use it, he said. But because you deserve to decide. I never opened it. I didn't need to. Because love, I learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it arrives in quiet gestures. In mornings made softer. In unspoken forgiveness. Our marriage had begun as a bargain. But in time, it became a bond. Not of debt, but of fate. And love.